other time zones in the world who'll be able to catch up on this at a time that's not midnight in their region. So my name is Sharon Bly. I lead health and wellness here at the Consumer Goods Forum, and as I said, I'm delighted to be joined by David today, who's going to bring you through Walmart's journey on how they've engaged their employees into their health and well-being agenda. We really like on CGF webinars to really make the most of the time to get insights and feedback and nuggets of information from the speaker. So I would encourage you throughout today's webinar to think about your questions. And you have two ways of getting those questions to David and myself. Either you can send me an email. When you think of something as David is speaking on the webinar, send me an email. You can see my email here on the screen, s.bligh@theconsumergoodsforum.com. Or you have on the right-hand side of your screen a chat box where you can ask questions to David, and I will collect all of those questions and we'll ask them to him at the end of the webinar. So please do use this time. It's your time, and we can have lots of great insights and feedback from David today. So just as I mentioned, I lead the work on health and wellness at the Consumer Goods Forum. We're a global industry network with 400 members in 70 countries, and we work on a number of strategic topics, ranging from environmental and social sustainability to product safety, the value chain, and the area that we're focusing on today, which is health and wellness. And part of our mandate is to share knowledge and best practices. So with that, I'll hand you over to David, who will bring you through the content of today's webinar, which is Employee Health and Wellness, the Walmart Journey. David, over to you.
Great, thanks Sharon, and thanks everyone for making some time this morning to listen to kind of the experience that we've had over the last 5 years at Walmart. As I get ready to dive in, of course, just to remind you of who we are, while many of you know the name, we do have a little over 2 million people around the world. 1.5 or so in the US, and the rest scattered around 69 or 27 different countries. So while most of our work to date has been focused in the US, there are many learnings we actually brought from the international world that helped us be at least get some reasonable success so far. So that's kind of who we are. If you want to slide down, Sharon. Just a quick reminder that what's interesting on this topic about really focusing on your people, as it goes back to the roots of the company, Sam Walton from the beginning understood that in order to be successful, you really had to find a way to celebrate your business and celebrate your people. And so this is a continuation in different forms because of different times of what was begun many, many years ago that I'm about to share with you today where we are. So Sharon, again, hop on down. And just a quick overview, this is what I hope to take you through today. There's really just three, I call this an act in 3 parts with some thoughts on the future that hopefully you might find useful. 1, how we started, 2, what we did with what we've learned, and then 3, how we're measuring the impact of what we've done so far, and then again, where we want to go in the future, and there's just some things that hopefully you can learn as well. So let's dive in. So like many people, we started 5 years ago, about 5.5 years ago now, when I got here with this idea of how we could actually do something to deliver what we called then employee wellness or associate wellness to our folks across the US in particular. And the focus was really, the question was, how do you do that in what we call everyday low cost way? Because with 1.6 million people, every time you spend $1, you're spending over $1 million. And like many companies, it's a significant investment. We didn't know where to begin. And so we really started like everyone else. We did a traditional, really a traditional approach to start with. We had a certified well-being survey. It was not we didn't start with a health risk assessment. It was a well-being assessment, measuring all the domains of well-being, which I'll cover in a second. We did biometric screening, and then we had coaching. And we had around 600, 700 people that we cross-matched over time with a 6-month period of time to see, could we actually engage people in a survey if we did what we learned from that? And fundamentally, there were 2 major questions. One was, would people actually improve? Could we show statistically significant improvements in certain well-being areas? And then more importantly, was this a wellness question, which we defined as a focus on physical health, or was this a well-being question? And that's what we wanted to understand. And the results of that I'll show you on the next 2 slides really began to chart the course, which is that we went where the data told us. And the first one was that in general, people just said they felt better about their life. And while it's very qualitative, if you think about what that means in a retail environment, or for many of us, when you're customer facing, if you feel better about your life, that's a very powerful statement. And we said, well, that's interesting, because in most US-based wellness programs, we're more concerned about reducing health risks than feeling better about their life. But that was a huge indicator for us. Going down, Sharon. But most importantly to us, this was a well-being story, and I'll talk about that more in a second. But this slide, when we asked people what were the barriers to work, what was keeping them from performing, it was personal problems and financial stress. Physical health was a lagging indicator. And so if you think about how we many times approach the work, how the industry has evolved, especially out of the US, it's been focused on physical health with maybe addressing these other issues. And so this really led us smack into the area of well-being versus wellness, and this expanded discussion about how we could actually help people change their full behavior and what the barriers have been to actually achieving behavior change. If you can slide down, Sharon. And this took us back to outside the US. So before I came to Walmart, I was with Yum Brands, where I did a similar role, most of the work being outside the US. And this construct of well-being being holistic versus just focused on physical health was very powerful, because when you give up the crutch of healthcare cost as the single defining feature of your program and the primary funding source, then suddenly you start thinking about, well, why aren't people changing their behaviors? And that really led us to move from I'm going to call a pathogenic approach to more of this behavior change model and applied behavior change. And that's the start of where we went, because if physical and financial and personal relationship issues are the barriers to performance, they're likely barriers to changing behavior in the physical realm as well. And as we dove into the research, we developed kind of these lessons that emerged from many other people that I've summarized in bold here. So we're more alike than different. So as human beings, we are more alike than different. Our differences matter greatly because diversity is incredibly important. And that while cultural variation might influence the motivational wrapper, the root behavior for all of us as Homo sapiens is very, very similar. And then lastly, this idea of capacity, that really we want people to perform, and we want them to perform at work. And it's synonymous, work and home. They are so blended, they are the same now. But you can only give what you have. So if we began to focus on the whole person to increase capacity, then they could give more, and we might likely win in many other categories. And that was the foundation that came from those early data sets. So Sharon? Which really led us to develop this kind of approach. We really said we need a new model, because while all of the work in the past has shown some success, while it has worked in some ways, it has not delivered breakthrough results or culture shifting results. We all still struggle with this escalating healthcare cost or the impacts of poor physical health on our business, whether it's the rise of obesity across the globe or type 2 diabetes. All of these things continue to happen despite many, many brilliant people focusing on this area for a very long time. And what we came to the conclusion was we need to look at a totally different approach from a system level. And so if I look at this slide, it really summarizes kind of what you'll see encapsulated with the products we've built and how we've gone about the work. So in the past, physical health was the sole focus. And now we're saying, no, we don't live our lives in these buckets independently, that my financial life is inexorably linked to my physical health. These are all part of the whole person, and we can't segment those. People don't live that way. Limit participation to a select group. This is a really interesting one to me. We really said, if you believe the research that habits are social and that our lives, we are social creatures, then limiting participation to a select group of people has really hurt us in the long run. And let me give you one example on that. So in most of my past, US focused, we have limited participation to health improving programs to those people enrolled in the medical plan, with maybe some offering to spouses, dependents, or family members. And sometimes that's been a matter of budget or eligibility because of the way we have defined as administrators the program. In this case, we've said, really we need to make things eligible for everyone, because when I just offered a program to David, who happens to be enrolled into the Walmart medical plan, and ignore his spouse or his best friend or his colleague across the country who's a key influence to him, I'm eliminating their support group. And so we really need to include more people to understand that he has all the support he or she needs to make the behavior change stick. So that was a big design issue we wrestled with early. Prescriptive and essentially controlled. I'll talk about this a little bit more later when we get into some of the big challenges we faced. But you know, we love to control things from corporate. We love to say and assume that because we say so, everyone will do what we say. And really, we're in a different world now. This whole idea of local control and informal influences has changed everything. So we said we had to get out of the way and allow people to crowdsource solutions or to develop solutions that work for them in their environment for many reasons that I'll get into a little bit later. We also don't think that incentives worked. We think it buys compliance. People do things to get the incentive. Again, it's expensive, it captures attention, but we think inspiration and aspiration is a much better way to set people free to live their lives. The message has to change. And then we don't want to just save money on healthcare. Yes, we hope to do that derivatively, but we really hope to set the capacity of our people free so they can be their best at home and at work, and then we'll measure the impacts of those, which we did. Sharon? So this is kind of what we said. We did a lot of associate interviews. We went out and talked to hundreds of associates over a 6-8 month period and just spent time with them. Not in focus groups, but really just in informal interviews, sitting in break rooms and drinking coffee and just visiting with them. And this is kind of what emerged from that, which has stayed fairly consistent with us over the last several years. This is kind of where we have shaped our program and how we built it. There's some intentional words I'll point out in the North Star, which is measurably improve business performance. That was our first one, not impact health-related costs, although that is important to us. We wanted a holistic well-being plan, of course, but families and communities was really important. From the beginning, we said this is bigger than our associates. And some of this is a keto. We said we're so big that it's easier to talk to everybody than just to talk to a select few. So our size helps us with this. But in general, this is how we built things from the beginning. And then our design philosophy, which we continue to look at today, every time we're looking at a new program or a new offering, build a movement, don't offer a program. We made a fundamental trade-off, and this has been a blessing and a curse to us from the beginning. We did not go and get huge leader support to start. We didn't have a big kickoff. We didn't create a company brand that this is the name of our program. We said we're going to start at the grassroots level, helping our people solve the problems that they are telling us are most important to them and do it in a way that's impactful. We're going to measure that, and then we're going to roll it up to try to create a ton of momentum at the grassroots level so that people could be our best advocates. We do this through people follow people, not information. Huge debate I have with many of my friends and colleagues that are in the health education area. Education is important. We're not saying it's not, but we think to get people started, this is really about learning from others, and that actually we send unintended messages when we develop educational-based programs. Because when they're educational-based programs, we have the old expert model of learning. And we think what we unintentionally say to people in that case is that we're smarter than you, come learn for us. And many people on these topics in particular are so sensitive from where they're starting, they don't want you to lecture them, they want you to hug them. And so we're really more interested in embracing their humanity and then setting them free there. And then when they're ready and getting progress, we can then educate them to get to the next level. And I'll give you some examples of that as we go along. Simple. Simple is really hard. We love to make things complicated, but keeping things really, really simple is really hard work. And then lastly, and one of the most important things for us, and this all came from what our associates told us, is that as organizations, many times we believe that everyone trusts us, our associates and employees in particular, and we believe trust is earned, not bestowed, and that in order to really cement trust, you have to be authentic and relevant. And in this area in particular, we have created this myth of wellness and health, which are really abstract to people. And so they're not really sure how relevant health is to their lives. They think of it as a clinical thing, not as the result of all of their daily actions. And so we wanted to make it really relevant and real to people to connect with them. We do measure. We have a measurement rubric we haven't strayed from. We'll talk about some results later. We look at what we call the AVP. We look at high energy levels and health impact, and then business performance. Sharon? Here's kind of an overall approach, kind of the idea of what we want to do. So we want to listen and learn. We want to co-create solutions because we think all the answers are out there. We just need to listen to them, which then in turn will lower the external demands that all of our people are facing in this combined world we live in today, which will improve their ability and capacity to perform, lead to improved business results, and the cycle will continue. I'm going to spend a moment on two pieces of this picture. One is the fact that it's cyclical. There's no doubt that we live in a high change world. The world we create today will be very different tomorrow. And we do this in our personal lives and in our professional lives. The only thing that's true is change. It's been so from the beginning of time. However, it's accelerating. And this ability to adopt what I'm going to call an iterative mindset, or sometimes called the growth mindset, is incredibly important for success. And even as incredibly important, perhaps more so, when we think about our daily habits. And I'll give you one example, just to illustrate the point. If any of you have ever had a new boss or gotten promoted, which I assume people have done one or both of those in their careers, you'll think about how you've been successful in the past and what got you that promotion or what led to the new career change or new role that you have. But with the new boss becomes a new way of working. And so you can't do everything you did in the past to be successful, but you have to pick the things that made you successful and then apply them to the new environment. That's the world we live in today all the time, especially with technology. And so with almost every facet of our life, the ability to develop this iterative mindset is really important. Now, as an employer, I'm going to talk for a second on this lower external demands. Many of you may recall, I know I do, back when my parents went to work, they went to work. The technology was cooler at work. When they went to work, they were isolated from us at home. We never bothered them at work. But the way the world is today, it's much more blended with the use of digital and mobile in particular. Many of us are checking smartphones, getting text messages from family, emails. This blended world works not just where we're taking work home, but where we're bringing home to work. And many of the things that distract us externally to work, when I say external, it's external to work, are things that are life related. And we'll talk later about financial insecurity and financial demands. But if people are stressed financially, just when they walk into the doors of employment, that doesn't go away. And the ability of mobile to reach into them and access them all the time creates this distraction level unlike any we've seen before. So our job on the well-being side is to figure out how do we disrupt that and help people with those things that are distracting them so they can focus on their life, both at work, and at home. But when they focus more at work, they're able to deliver better service, better results, take more advantage of the opportunities that are in front of them, and overall thrive more holistically. So those two pieces of this cycle are particularly important to point out. Sharon? So that's kind of how we started. So what do we do with that information? I'm going to walk through kind of 2 products we've done now, and then also some results we've had. Next. This is 3 of the products right now. We have a suite of them. I'm going to talk about Zip Challenge first, and I'm going to talk about Even. I will not be talking about Resources for Living today, not because I don't want to, but just as a matter of time, and it's an extension of some things we started in the past. So let's start with Zip, which is our broadest and most mature particular program at this point. Next slide. So Zip Challenges focuses on 4 main areas. What we did here was we built something based upon what we heard from our folks, which was these are the areas in the way that they talk about them that they struggle with most in their life. This is how they think about their life holistically: food, fitness, family, and money. What's interesting to this is we talk about finances many times as companies. Our associates don't think in terms of finances, they think in terms of money. They think of family not as a traditional unit, but of the people that they care about. So this is everyone that they love. They have their work family, they have their home family, they have their friend family. So it's a very broad definition of family. Food and fitness, they separate. Many times we'll bring those together in physical health, but they think about those as separate entities. Next slide. So really what Zip did was we started this with some really simple design principles, and it was a paper-based booklet to start. You see pictures of some of the original booklets on the right-hand side. So what we did with Zip was we said, okay, what we're going to do is put out some booklets in the break rooms, and we're going to ask people to actually literally check a box on a piece of paper when they make a better choice, any better choice today than they did yesterday in 1, 2, 3, or all 4 of those categories I mentioned before: fitness, family, food, or money. It's a 6-month challenge period. Okay, so we do 2 Zip challenges a year. We're just getting ready to end one right now. It'll end February 28th. The next one will start March 1st. Over that 6 months period, you could complete as many of these booklets as you wanted to. Each booklet represented 1 month's worth of challenges, 30 days. We now do a 21-day challenge because we've gone digital, but when we started, it was 30 days. So think about, you could do 6 of these over the course of a challenge period and make these check marks of better choices in fitness, family, food, or money. So let's use food as an example, because we always made in the past nutrition so complicated. What we said here was, I make 1 better choice today than yesterday, I can check the box. So if I ate 6 Oreos today and 5 tomorrow, I check the box. I'm not moving someone to a completely vegan diet on day 1. I'm taking them from where they are today and moving them slowly every day in a new direction so that they can build confidence. And each step is very small and thus very achievable for them. This was really important for 2 reasons. One was it allowed people to define their own journey, and it took shame and guilt out of the way. Unintentionally, we so often will start people by saying, here's what you should do because we're the experts. And if they fail to live up to our expectation, they feel guilty and they're ashamed. And then that lapse, that minor lapse, becomes a collapse, and they go all the way back to square one. In this case, we said, no, we're going to start you where you are, and you define what's better for you. Because truthfully, if you put 3 plates of food in front of people, they could tell you generally what's the best choice of those 3 plates, what's the healthiest choice. But asking them to eat that every day from where they are today is very hard. Now, we're not saying this is the end, that people should just stop if they eat 5 Oreos, right? Because the idea was to keep going every day. And so it worked really well. And they would check the box, and at the end of their 30 days, or now in the app, 21 days, you answer a question. And the question is, if you could inspire 1 person to live a better life, who would it be and why? And then you answer that question, and you decide if you want to submit an official entry. When you submit that entry, what do you get? Well, you get a chance to win prizes. So you can see on the cover of that book, it's $100,000 in prizes. We're up to $150,000 in prizes right now. And what that is, it's like a lottery construct. So if you're looking at behavioral economics, we've done a lottery construct here. You submit your entry and you get a chance to win. And what do you get? Well, you get a chance to win prizes. We do 23 awards every 6 months. Our grand prize is $25,000. Our second prize is 15. Our third is 10. And then we do 25,000 runner-up awards. But as importantly, what this did was it created a mechanism for us to collect stories. So you have to tell us about your zip journey in order to be considered for the prizes. And you're selected as a champion not based upon how much weight you've lost or how much exercise you've done or how much money you saved. It's about the qualitative aspects of your journey, about what did you learn? How do you want to share with others? Remember, the question is, who would you inspire and why, which instills a sense of purpose that's extrinsic to you, so that you're living for someone else. So we're looking for those qualities and how they would represent to others, because we want you, when you submit your entry, to be an ambassador for the program, which means that the picture on the front of the book that you see here is an actual Walmart associate. We take their stories, we make them rock stars, right? They actually get photo shoots, they get Ed McMahon checks from like the big sweepstakes awards, and we celebrate them across the company so that they can inspire other people. Remember, we said earlier, inspiration and aspiration versus incentives. Yes, we use the lottery concept. We like to say people follow people, but money makes them turn their head. Here, what you're seeing is now we're doing what I'm calling crowdsource solutions to these problems, because they come up with ideas that you and I never would. I'm going to give you one example that is in the weight loss realm to illustrate that. We had an associate who was one of the winners for us in one of the recent challenges, who's lost well over 100 pounds and kept it off for a period of time. So it's not just a rebound thing. And what they told us was that every time they went on this dietary binge in the past, or this attempt to lose weight and keep it off, that they had a fondness for potato chips. They loved chips. And every time they were meeting with nutritionists and experts, they would get so far and then they were told no more chips. And they just gave into their craving. And eventually what would happen is that they felt bad about themselves because they were eating chips again and they just backslid. Now, there's probably a lot more to it than that, but that's the general story. But what they did with this 1 better choice a day, was they actually were able to say, well, I'm gonna eat a whole bag of chips today. Tomorrow, I'll leave 1 chip in the bag. I can eat all but 1 chip. That's a better choice than yesterday. And they kept making those better choices until now they couldn't eat any chips in the bags. So what they did then was they actually began to figure out, how can I get the flavor from the chip without actually eating the chip? And so they were able to satisfy their craving in a way that didn't make them feel bad about themselves, our old friends, shame and guilt, and yet maintain success. And so that was the power of taking our expectation off them and letting them define their own journey. And when they share that in their stories that other associates read, an associate can see themselves, a human being can see themselves in that story, versus something we might see on an infomercial on TV about going all the way immediately from where I am today to a full vegan lifestyle. So that's a really good example. We also started with paper on purpose for another reason that's fairly important, and that's the idea of anonymity. People know they're being tracked. And every time we require people to sign up for things so that we can track participation, they know that if they fail, that they're being called out. Now, they're not being called out by name, but they see themselves on the loser side of the bracket there. So when you think of one of the criticisms of most of a wellness program designs is that they get the healthy people who are doing this anyway. What we saw with this anonymous design, celebrating stories, was that full 50% or so of the original entries we received were anonymous. No one to tell us who, they didn't want to tell us who they were, but they were looking for someone to tell their story to. They wanted to be heard. The second thing was that people would save their booklets and then submit them over time. It would be, quite a period of time before they submitted a full entry. It might be a year and a half. And many of them say, I started my Zip journey a year and a half ago, and now I'm ready to tell my tale. And these are people that went through extreme changes in their life. The last thing is many of them started their story with, I was in a very dark place. So we feel like we're really reaching a demographic and a group of people that needed someone to connect with, looking for community to support them who have been underserved in the past. And so we're really happy with that. So we started with that paper version. We ran that for a full couple of years. We started with digital about a year and a half ago. We very carefully for lots of reasons. You can go to the next slide now, Sharon. We did that for a lot of reasons, and mainly because we were concerned about mindlessness, the opposite of mindfulness, and that we think that you outsource many tasks to your smartphone. So we did a much better job, really carefully, almost painfully slowly working through how we would do an app. We're on generation 3 of the app right now. We're finally leaning into the digital world. We're seeing a big shift from entries from 85% paper to now we're looking at probably well over 60-70% digital, and the challenge that's ending right now. In the last 4 years or so, we've had well over 1 million participants, because remember, this is unlimited eligibility, which means everyone on the phone today could download the app, or if you could find a booklet, get a booklet, and you could complete your Zip challenge and submit an entry, and you may very well be eligible for the prize pool. Well, you would be eligible, but you may actually win. We have had the mother of an associate win third prize at some point, and that's because legally this is a sweepstakes or a challenge, not a wellness program. And so when the judging occurs, which is done by our partners in the Zip group, it has to be done blinded, so they don't know who's a Walmart associate or not. And the only say that we have as a company is if someone has an open ethics ticket, meaning they're under investigation for some ethical violation, then we can say they're not eligible to win the award for the company. As you can see here, in terms of participation, we're feeling really good about it. We're up over 75,000 app downloads now, over 1 million participants, and 24 million better choices. We started counting every time someone checks a box, the number of better choices they made. So it's going really well. We're quite pleased with it. We're going to make probably 3 or 4 more updates to the app as this year goes along. Next slide, Sharon. This is just a graph of how we grew the program participation-wise. On the far left, in 2012, we started with 9 stores. Those 9 stores, they were chosen just to test how this would work. All right, and so you see the number of entries, and then it grew. Really, remember we said build a movement, don't offer a program. This grew through a pull strategy. So groups started to come to us and say, hey, we want to offer this in our region or in our market. That's what happened in 2013. And it wasn't until the last part of 2014 that we began to offer this to all stores in the US, and then in 15, all stores in the US and Puerto Rico. And the asterisk just means we changed our reporting period there. So you can see those are active participants as of the date I ran it. 2017 is not done for us yet because we end at the end of this month, but really nice graph up and to the right. We feel good about that. Next slide. I will say, and you can hit this twice so that the full thing comes up. On the previous slide, I will just mention, the other part we've done a lousy job of is marketing. We have not done a good job at all at marketing. We have some materials in the store. We celebrate winners, but in terms of actually really marketing the way many of our companies are used to doing, we don't do a very good job of that. We then looked at impact on business results. I'm only sharing one slide here. I'll walk you through, but we did 2 business outcome measures. One was this one here. We said, let's understand that if we can unleash the capacity of our people to perform, how would we actually measure the impact on the business? And but us as a retail unit, we said, well, how will we look at organizational or unit level economics? So I was less concerned about individual behavior change in this study as I was on proving to the company that we could actually impact business performance. And for us as a retailer, we're concerned about the performance of the box. So what does each supercenter in this study, for example, how do they perform? And we looked at net revenue per square foot. Obviously, I'm not going to give you sales data today. This data will illustrate how we went about the work, and I'll talk about the results we saw, but I'm not going to give you the actual sales numbers. I'm not allowed to. But what we did was we did a big data analytic project. We partnered with some external experts to understand how to do this. We pulled together things from we worked from Cal Berkeley. We used some analytic techniques called random forest and glm.net. For those you statisticians on the call, I'm not. I only can tell you a little bit of the background of that. But we actually pulled data from all across the company, almost every part of the company, from finance to realty, et cetera, because we felt like in order to do this work, we had to be able to understand what were the predictors of net revenue per square foot. And then if we understood what they were, what was their contribution level? And then how could we hold them constant? Now, this is all correlational, not causative. And we were very, very comfortable with correlational data. And I would encourage all of us to get more comfortable with correlational data. And that's how we went about the work. So we did many cuts of this to get it right. This is about 1.5 years just to understand the data and all of the relationships between the data. So we felt really positive in our ability to predict net revenue. The little picture in the left-hand side of the screen with the arrows shows how accurate we were able to cluster our prediction of store performance. So when we looked at a combination of external variables and internal variables, this is everything from where the store sits to distance to competitor to health of the community, along with turnover in the stores, engagement scores, things of that nature. We were able to predict roughly 90% of the revenue per square foot. So the 10% that was left is represented by the bell curve at the bottom of this, the big picture in the middle. That 10%, the question was it meaningful? Now we run each supercenter is roughly about 150,000 square feet. So if we were looking at even $1 per square foot, right, that's $150,000. But if you start to get to $10 a square foot, suddenly it's $1.5 million. So it was a pretty good extreme at the edges. The difference in the variation in performance per square foot was very significant to the business. And then we were able to then, once we could control for everything else, account for a really nice somewhere between $2 and $10 per square foot contribution to net revenue based upon participation in our well-being work. So the cost is much less than that, but those are the numbers that we were able to prove at a statistically significant level, again, using correlational data. So this was powerful. We did some internal white paper with this. We've shared some of this externally a few times. We felt really good about the work, and of course the business was quite pleased that we were able to show some ROI, not in the traditional method of healthcare spend, which I'll talk about in a second, but more in the area of business performance. The other piece that we looked at was looking at the impact of stores that participated early on with our Zip Challenge and impact on customer satisfaction. And again, we saw about a 3% lift in stores at a statistically significant level of stores that participated and the impact on customer satisfaction. We did a cohort comparison here, looking at a 9-month pre, 9-month post period. The study looking at net revenue was a 12-month period to account for seasonality. So those two were done. In terms of healthcare costs, we've done the least amount of work looking at the impact of Zip on healthcare costs. We've done some qualitative reviews of these stories that have been submitted over the last 4 years, and we're seeing about a 20% of the population are telling us, we haven't validated it in the data yet, that they're losing 100 pounds or more and maintaining that for at least a year. 80% are telling us that they're losing at least 7% of their body weight, so up to 20-30 pounds per person. So we're feeling it's very effective in that area. And we're actually going to do a study this year where we're going to measure the impact of participants on medication adherence, medication possession, disease progression, some of the more classic healthcare costs. But that's the least important to us. We're most interested in how they feel and what they say. I would encourage you to go to the ZP website, zipchallenge.com. It's public, zpchallenge.com, and look at the stories and look at some of the videos because what's powerful then for the company is our people are telling the story of how they changed, what it means to their lives, which we believe will have a long-term impact on the company. Next slide, Sharon. So that's Zip. So now a little bit about Even. So we did look at financial insecurity. You can go to the next slide. So Zip had been running for a couple years. We finished all of that, and we said, well, let's go back and talk to our associates about financial insecurity. We saw some evidence, of course. There's things like in the U.S., people can't find $400 to pay an emergency bill. We know that there's a lot of economic pressure, especially on the hourly worker. And we did a ton of research, again, with our associates. We think all the answers are out there. We just went and talked to people. And what we learned was that this wasn't really an educational issue, that there are some very savvy people at all levels of the pay scale. And that really this was an issue as much, if anything, as the way that we pay people. Now, it's true that the pressures are felt more when people make less money, depending on their income, on what they do with that money. But it's also true that we have people that are high paid that don't do a good job taking care of their finances either. This is a behavioral issue. And so we went after trying to solve insecurity very laser-like on some very specific areas. So this is, I like to call this an ecosystem issue. And the reason that we went after this was twofold. It wasn't that everyone was screaming that there was a huge issue in our associate data set, but really it was we saw some behavior with our stock purchase plan that seemed to indicate that people were not taking full advantage of that in the way that it was intended. And then as we did associate interviews, they talked about pressure, food pressure. They talked about pressure of taking care of their families. And they also then told us that some of it was timing. And then this was complemented by the research that was out there talking about the impact of financial pressures on cognitive load, or the abilities for someone to just make a good, sound judgment or decision. And so we said, well, gee, if we're asking people to take advantage of the opportunities in front of them, to execute their tasks with excellence, but they're under this pressure that really gets in the way of them being able to make good decisions, which is what the research told us, this seems like an area we should get after. And we went out and looked, and we found a startup in Oakland called Even, and then we brought them together with a product that we announced in December, and it was really to do two things. And if you go to the next slide, we'll show you what those are. It does two things. It does automated personal financial management and also access to earned wages. Okay, so we said, okay, let's start with the one, finance management. So many of you may be familiar with Mint or otherwise, or think about your own electronic banking. So the way that it works in the world today is we as companies pay weekly, bi-weekly, every 2 weeks, monthly. We establish a pay structure. And that's at our decision. At Walmart, we make 26 pays a year, so it's every 2 weeks. But the bills come in once a month. And those bills come in, the timing is off on that. My rent might be due 3 days before my paycheck. And I have no say in the timing of those bills, by the way. And furthermore, I really don't have a good source to tell me what my actual cash flow is today. I can go to my banking app and it can tell me how much money is in my bank account, but it can't tell me how much I have to spend without getting myself in trouble. And if many people have overdraft fees, then this is where they get into a problem. And so if you think about what I said a moment ago about the pressure and the impact of that financial pressure on your ability to make decisions. And then you say, now I've been juggling these bills every day for 3 weeks or 4 weeks. I'm at the end of the month and I've got to pay rent and I've got some medical bills due. And I'm just tired. And I just want to go out and get a hamburger and a Coke. And I don't know how much money I have to spend. And I just say, I'm going to do it because I deserve it. And then I get into an overdraft fee. What Even does is using machine learning, it connects to your bank and it helps automatically plan for those bills. So all you have to do is confirm that you want them to plan for that, and then it gives you an okay to spend. So you can see on the screen, like it'll say, you have $387 in this example that's okay to spend. Your payday's in 3 days. We're planning for your bills. Here's what they are. And so now you have one spot to go to say, if I only spend $30 a day, and actually in the app today, it actually tells you how much each day that amounts to between now and payday. You know what you have if they've accounted for your bills. So that's kind of a single source of truth to try to eliminate some of that pressure of doing the mental juggling that you had. The other piece of it that we brought in is through a company called PayActive. So we made Even and a company called PayActive work together, or we asked them to work together. And PayActive brought together some expertise in what we call earned wage access, which is really addressing two things, timing issues and emergencies. So I mentioned earlier that the rent might be due today, but my payday is in 3 days. It could also be that I'm driving to work and my tire blew out and now I got to get my tire fixed and I hadn't planned for that emergency expense. So what earned wage access does is it gives you access to money that you've already earned but not yet been paid ahead of schedule. So it's kind of redefining payday to allow you to get access to your pay when you need it versus when we tell you you should have it. So those are the two key features that we have that we've brought together in one spot. Next slide. I just kind of talked about that, and I'm going to actually skip over that to go to the next slide. This is a snapshot of the dashboard that we get. This changes every day. So this is, I think, from 2 days ago. So this tells you the new signups that we had that day, 488. The InstaPay transactions is how many people accessed their earned wages ahead of schedule, 2,000. We moved $500,000 in that day through that vehicle. You can see the summary there. Total current active users was now 75,000. We have two features of this, what we call Basic and Plus. Basic is you get access to your EWAs at no charge to you. You get 4 of those a year, 1 per quarter. Plus means if you want access to that on a more regular basis, the associate pays $6 for that. And so that's the Plus folks. You see the current amount year to date and all the summary statistics. So I'll point out 2 key things here and then some things that aren't on the slide. So to date, since December, we've moved $33 million through this, which shows quite a bit of cash flow. And you see the average InstaPay at 178. Interesting, I find it interesting. It's about a 75% hourly use case, 25% salary. The hourly associate is pulling about $150 per InstaPay transaction. The salary associate is pulling more like $350 to $400. We did set some guardrails around access to this. So for example, it's only access to 50% of your available pay versus all of it, and that's to account for taxes and benefit costs and things of that nature. And then we're only allowing 1 per pay period. We don't want people to see this as kind of a quick access to cash in an inappropriate way. So we're being cautious about that. It's early yet. We're studying the outcomes. We don't have good outcome data yet because we just announced the big launch in December. We did about an 18-month test with a variety of versions of this before we launched. So that's what we're doing there. Next slide. Those are the 2 big products that we've done. I thought that what I would do now in the few minutes before we go to questions is just give you some quick thoughts on kind of the future and what we see as the future. Next slide. In both instances, what we saw, all of my colleagues and many people talk about engagement. How do we get engagement? And so every time that we talk to our associates as real people and talk to them just as we would talk to a consumer, if we think about consumer-facing product, our associates are consumers. Every time we did that, we've had no trouble getting engagement. Where we've struggled is when we tried to make it more wonkish or a little more, this is associate language. So our associates are customers, and sometimes we don't talk about them. So that was a huge learning, and one that I think that we're going to continue to build on. We have to be better merchandisers and marketers of our work. Our associates are human beings. The issues they're facing are no different than the issues that are faced in society at large. And so we need to talk to them just as we would talk to a customer outside of the company. Next slide. I like to think about this movement idea, right? That really we need to understand the impact we have as companies and that our associates have and the ecosystem they live in. Unlimited eligibility was an incredibly powerful tool for us. We see it manifesting itself in ways that we could never imagine. With Zip, everyone participates with their family. With Even, we couldn't do that because it's about access to wages and time and attendance. But every time we let you include more people versus less, engagement and sentiment goes through the roof. And this is just a great way, call this the bow tie slide, but thinking about how all of us collectively, through focusing on our associates or employees, how they help influence other people, the communities that we live in the world. We're doing it anyway. We need to lead into that more, would be our key thinking for the future. We need to partner more aggressively with what we're doing inside and out, public-private partnerships, shared corporate value. These are concepts we think are incredibly important in this space because there's no differences between what our customers and our societies are facing and what our associates are facing. These are solutions that should be for everyone if we can find a way to make that work. Next. You know, we do need to really have a coordinated effort. I couldn't tell you more strongly how much we think we have to go away from this traditional risk reduction and pathogenic focus on well-being, on wellness, and move toward this holistic view of well-being. We just have to evolve. There's nothing the matter with the past unless the sole focus of your program is to save money on healthcare. then you have to go down that way hard. But if you want to go bigger and get more people, then you just have to move into more applied behavior change. Keep the best of the past. There have been some incredible learnings from some brilliant people. Keep the best of that, but build on the best of what we're learning today and iterate and grow this thing. We want to leverage our customer-facing assets to create a bridge between what we as organizations do and what we want our people to do and what they want. The health and wellness industry on the customer side is $1 trillion industry and growing rapidly. And yet we always say we struggle with engagement. We need to align those messages more fully. And finally, trust the science. There's there's an explosion of science in the social sciences right now about behavior change. Some of it good, some of it not so good. But there's an explosion of it. We're just beginning to understand how the human brain works, about how change really works, about the impact of social structures, about connection and community. We need to lean into that. Understand that we're going to make some mistakes, but move in that direction so that we sync up what's happening inside our companies with what's happening outside. Let's stop treating them as independent silos. Next. And those were the big takeaways from us and kind of where our journey has been. Happy to begin, I think, to take questions and answers now or comments. So thanks for your attention, and I appreciate you joining this morning.
David, thank you very much for sharing all of that information on the inspirational journey. Lots of great insights and really promising figures. So a huge thank you for sharing that. So I would encourage all of you, question and answer time. You can either use the chat box on your screen, or as noted earlier, don't hesitate to send me an email now, or after the webinar if something comes to mind, and I'll follow up with David and make sure we get the answer to you. So David, the first question I have is regarding the rollout of these programs, and if they're available country by country, and how you manage the country-specific approaches. Do you have any learnings on rolling this out in different markets?
So we haven't rolled in international yet. We're preparing to do so in ZIP. We were close to doing that in LATAM last year. But I'll tell you how our plan was. First of all, we had to look at all of the laws in each country around challenges or sweepstakes, and so the full digital experience, for example, in this example for Spanish, was very important, because if we used paper booklets in countries, there was a different set of laws. So digital, we can make it available in different countries now, legally, especially, and we have it in full Spanish and full English. The way we were going to roll it out is we think that what you do is you start with a small group in order to kind of get them bought in, but also in order to generate your first level of stories. What makes this powerful, it does have a little bit of a longer tail, meaning that it takes a little longer to really get going, because you don't want to do a boom splat. You want to really do with a smaller group, get them in so you can get some really good first-person stories. Everyone's always curious, will it work for me? And what we've seen with different organizations is that we'll get their own zealous participants first that are willing to share their stories. So our plan is to do the same thing with different formats in different countries. Is start with a small group, get the stories, and then broaden it over the course of about a year to a year and a half. So it's about a year and a half till full implementation if we really want to do it right, and then you can go big from there.
Great, thank you. David, the next question, if you could give a little bit more detail about getting internal alignment and getting this type of massive program off the ground internally, and some of the challenges maybe you faced on that journey.
Yeah, so two big things. So we really managed expectations. So I was very fortunate. I had great leaders who gave me room to experiment clearly. But we also did a lot of managing expectations early on. And what I mean by that was we started with the classic approach, but economically we couldn't scale that. So think about trying to pull people off the floor in all of our super centers, to do biometric screening, just the cost of that. And we began to highlight for leadership early on why we needed to do something very different. And so what I would say, and what I say to my colleagues in the US in particular, is that we spend most of our corporate budgets on health risk assessments and biometric screenings, which tells us almost always very similar outcomes. Everyone needs to move more, eat better, reduce their stress, sleep more, quit tobacco if you're using it. So rather than spend all my effort on what I know, I don't need to repeat that science experiment anymore. Let's focus on applied behavior change. And so when we told them that message, they were acceptable to that or amenable to that. And then we said we're going to focus on engagement. We're going to focus on keeping the costs low, and we're going to focus on really connecting with our associates. So those were the key points early on, telling them it's going to be a build, that we were going to give up data. We gave up data to build trust and had them agree to that early on. Those were the early alignment challenges. And then again, the ability to collect true associate stories, which are incredibly inspirational, and share those with leaders, bought us time to allow it to grow, so then we could show the data. A failure of many programs is the inability to actually collect stories from people because we put all these rules in play. And so there's this disconnect between what we do and what we actually hear. All we report is the cold hard facts rather than the softer pieces of what's happening to people. So early on, it was managing expectations, talking about how we were going in a direction and why, and getting their agreement, and then allowing them, and then getting those stories so that we could buy time to let the data come to a point where we could share it.
Great, thank you. David, next question is about, I suppose, healthy competition and how you managed that internally between the associates, and would you recommend for companies thinking about building this competitive piece, people follow people, as you said, would you recommend absolutely having a digital element to enable that internally?
Well, yes to the digital piece. I think competition's a double-edged sword. We've tried and failed several times with competition. So if competition was about participation, then we failed. So what we saw was, whenever this has felt really optional, the idea of optionality, because remember I talked about anonymity early on, the idea of optionality has been really important to capturing engagement. So when people felt like this is for them, not something we're doing to them, they participate. So we made some mistakes twice because we're not smart, right? And we did the same thing twice, which was to say, hey, we're going to create a contest across markets or stores around entry submissions for Zip, for example. You know, when we did that, it took away the feeling of optionality and people actually stopped participating. So we've now begun doing some competition around better choices, this idea of better choices. The outcome we want is for people to make better choices. And we've done some early testing on competition around better choices, and that has worked. So my caution on contests is, what is it that you're measuring? Because if you're measuring participation, that might not be the behavior change. So we will be doing some competition with Even to see if we can get adoption across markets. Again, we want to do that gingerly, because what we really want is improved financial security, which may or may not come from Even. What we want is improved health and life, which may or may not come from Zip. So let's focus on the right competition. But digital you have to have, especially in today's day and age. Just be aware that when you do digital, they know we're tracking them. So that idea of anonymity continues to be something we wrestle with.
Great, thank you. I have another question about your comment on everyone can participate. Are you tracking family results when it's open to everyone? How do you manage between Walmart associates and other people, or other people in the community or the ecosystem?
Well, to date, we haven't had any difference between the way we treat anybody in the community, family member or associate. So they've all been treated the same in the current version of Zip. In particular, everyone's treated the same. Judging's done the same. So in the future, so as we get into April, July, September of this year, we're planning a series of upgrades where we're going to be adding what we're going to call a freemium premium version to the Zip app, where the premium version would allow access to some additional features for Walmart associates and their family members, and customers then would have a different experience. So talk to me in 6 months to a year. I'll be able to give you a little better data on what we're seeing between family, associate, and customer. We're also considering creating an alumni experience so that we would have three different experiences. Everyone will always participate in the Zip Challenge. We think the community aspects are incredibly important, and we hope to have community champions, customers who are winners sometime in the next 6 to 8 months, because of the way we're going to market things differently. But there'll be a better back end where we'll be able to tell you who's an alumni, who's a customer, who's an active associate, or their family member.
Great, thank you very much. And that is all of the questions that I've received to date via email. So a big thank you, David, for sharing your insights with us today. If you do have questions, or you think of something that you'd like to follow up with David, don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can see all of our contact details at CGF Health and Wellness here on your screen. We'd love to hear from you. We do have an employee health and wellbeing work stream, and we're planning our path to 2023. So very open to getting insights and building on David and others' experience in the health and wellness pillar. So a big thank you, everyone, for your attention today, and the webinar recording will be available on our website. Thank you very much, everyone, and big thank you, David.
Thank you, Sharon.
Bye-bye. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye,
Thank
you too.